They said the Council of Worlds could never be shaken, that its laws were eternal, its power absolute, its wisdom older than the stars themselves. But that was before the humans came, before a ship no larger than a freighter slipped through the void, silent and uninvited, bearing a name no one had spoken in 1,000 generations: Earth. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but in that moment, everything it believed about civilization, law, and power was about to be rewritten. It began as a whisper in the dark, a sensor anomaly logged by an automated relay drifting at the edge of the Androvi expanse. A small craft, metallic hull, electromagnetic emissions primitive by modern standards. No quantum signature, no tachyon veil, no gravimetric displacement. It was the kind of object that would normally be ignored, debris perhaps, or an ancient probe from a forgotten age. But this one moved with purpose. It wasn't drifting, it was navigating. The relay sent its data to a regional outpost, where a bored technician flagged it as a curiosity. Within hours, the anomaly report reached the attention of the Galactic Compact's Central Monitoring Array. The station's algorithms struggled to classify the vessel's propulsion system. Fusion-based, chemical-assisted, crude, impossibly so. And yet, somehow, it had crossed interstellar distances that even modern civilizations found perilous. When the first transmission came through, the analysts thought it was interference, until the words resolved into perfect galactic common, spoken with a calm, distinctly human rhythm. This is the diplomatic vessel Solace, representing the planet Earth Sol system. We come under the Compact's Articles of Founding, seeking dialogue and recognition. The council chambers went silent. The message was played, replayed, and dissected by linguistic AIs. The voice was undeniably sentient. But the name, Earth, sent waves of unease through those who remembered the legends. Humanity was not supposed to exist anymore. According to every record, they had been among the original signatories of the Compact, one of the founding races that helped forge galactic order, before vanishing in the cataclysm that erased entire sectors. The thought of their return was heresy and impossibility intertwined. Yet the ship was real. Its signal followed protocol so old that even the Council's archives struggled to interpret it. Under Compact law, written by those same founders, any species that invoked the Articles of Founding had the right to a hearing before the Great Assembly. It was a clause no one had used in tens of millennia. But law was law. Even gods had to obey the rules they wrote. 3 cycles later, the Solace arrived. It glided into Unity Station's docking bay like a relic from an age of myths. Matte gray hull, visible weld seams, no ornamentation, no living architecture. The watching crowds whispered in disbelief. Was this truly a vessel from the species that helped build the Compact? It looked primitive. But then, when the airlock opened, the murmurs ceased. 3 figures stepped out. They were small compared to most species, fragile even. Their flesh was soft, their features oddly symmetrical. But their eyes were not the eyes of primitives. They were cold, bright, and endlessly aware. The leader, a woman with streaks of gray in her hair, wore a simple suit of black fabric with no markings save a silver pin shaped like a branch, an olive branch. She bowed slightly and spoke with measured grace. "Ambassador Lyra Halden," she said, "representative of Earth and its allied systems, we thank the Council for granting us audience." The High Arbiter's crystalline body refracted the chamber's light into 1,000 accusing shards. "You come invoking laws older than your flesh," it hissed, voice vibrating through the crystal lattice of its form. What claim does your extinct kind have upon this council? Halden smiled, not mockingly, but with a confidence that unsettled the entire chamber. Extinct? Hardly. We've simply been gone long enough for your memories to fade. The chamber erupted in uproar. Delegates shouted demands for proof, accusations of fraud, charges of blasphemy. But the humans did not flinch. They carried no weapons, no escorts, no technological marvels. Only the crystal-encased olive branch, held reverently in the hands of one of the aides, a symbol of peace from a world no one believed still existed. When they reached the central podium, Halden placed the branch before the council. "This was once offered between our kind and yours, when the compact was young," she said softly. "We offer it again, not as submission, but as remembrance." Her words resonated through the chamber, carried on the psychic hum of the station's translators. The delegates who had mocked their arrival found themselves uneasy, though none could explain why. There was a weight to the human's presence, not of power, but of intention, as though these frail beings had come not to ask for permission, but to remind the galaxy of something it had chosen to forget. The High Arbiter tilted its gleaming head. "You invoke the law of founding," it said. "Very well, you shall be heard. But understand this, human, the compact does not yield. It does not change. The laws of the galaxy are older than you, older than your sun. They are not rewritten." Halden met its refracted gaze and spoke a single line that silenced even the telepaths of the outer rings. "Everything written by sentience can be rewritten by it." Those words spread across the galaxy within hours. Some laughed, dismissing them as arrogance. Others whispered them as prophecy. And somewhere, in the archives of 1,000 worlds, forgotten records stirred. Old data keys marked with the emblem of a blue planet, a symbol of outstretched hands beneath a rising sun. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy felt the faint, ancient heartbeat of humanity again. They had come not with fleets, not with conquest, but with words sharper than any blade, older than any law. And by the time the council realized what those words truly meant, it would already be too late. Because the humans hadn't come to join the compact. They had come to fix it. The Great Assembly Hall had never known silence like this. For 10,000 years, its walls had vibrated with the noise of power, of laws shouted, bargains struck, and empires defended through clever rhetoric and calculated deceit. But when Ambassador Lyra Halden stood beneath the obsidian spire and placed her hand on the ancient marble of the Founders' Table, every voice fell away. The air grew heavy, almost reverent. It was as if the ghosts of the first civilizations had returned to listen. The Founders' Table itself was a relic, a massive circular slab forged from the compressed remains of a dead neutron star, etched with sigils representing the original 12 species that had created the compact. 11 of those sigils still shone with power. The 12th, once belonging to Homo sapiens, had long since been darkened, its light extinguished by decree after their supposed extinction. And yet, as the humans took their place at the table's edge, a faint pulse began to flicker through the dormant mark, as though something ancient were stirring awake. Halden stood unmoving while the delegates of the great races took their seats in concentric circles rising above the floor, shimmering bodies of crystal, plasma, chitin, and light, each representing a civilization that believed itself wiser than the rest. Some looked down with curiosity, others with contempt. None yet understood what they were witnessing. The High Arbiter's voice rang out through the chamber, its resonance vibrating the marble. "The Articles of Founding are clear," it declared. "You claim the right of the originators to speak before this body. Then speak, human. Speak your truth before those who inherited your ashes." Halden raised her eyes slowly, her gaze sweeping the tiers of alien faces, each so different, each radiating arrogance. "Our truth," she began, her voice calm, her tone deliberate, "is that you have forgotten what this council was meant to be. You were meant to protect life, to preserve peace, to build something greater than any single species could dream. Instead," she let the silence linger, her words slicing through the stillness, "you have built an empire of chains." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted, translators scrambled to catch up with the overlapping noise, and the High Arbiter's crystalline form blazed with furious light. "How dare you?" it thundered. "You stand here as a supplicant and accuse the compact of tyranny?" Halden's gaze didn't waver. "We stand here as witnesses." She gestured, and her aide placed a small, metallic cube upon the table. The device hummed softly, then projected an image into the air. Not a hologram, but a memory, sharp and painful. A world burning under orbital bombardment, cities collapsing, civilians, human and alien alike, fleeing in terror. "This," Halden said quietly, "is Runaris IX, destroyed 6 cycles ago under compact sanction for non-compliance with trade harmonization. 58 million souls vaporized because they refused to sell their oceans to a corporate bloc. You called it justice." The hollow shifted again. Now a field of broken ships, scavenger fleets shattered by compact enforcement drones for harvesting debris in restricted zones. "And this, the Tillian Free," Halden continued. "A people who never raised a weapon. You erased them from the registries." A wave of discomfort rippled through the assembly. A few tried to object, but Halden raised a hand and the cube flickered again, showing one final scene. A council broadcast, centuries old, announcing the extinction of humanity. The text beneath the broadcast bore the compact's own seal. "Declared extinct due to non-compliance with genetic regulation mandates," she read aloud. "We were erased for refusing to conform to your definition of perfection." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the High Arbiter's crystalline light dimmed slightly, uncertain for the first time in millennia. "Humanity survived," Halden said, her voice now colder, harder. "We hid. We built quietly, far from your laws, your reach, your arrogance. And we watched. We watched as the compact transformed from an alliance of free peoples into a bureaucracy of fear. We watched as every law that was meant to protect life became a weapon to control it. You call yourselves civilized, but your civilization is rot, polished into marble." Several delegates shouted accusations, lies, distortion, rebellion, but others stayed quiet, their gazes uneasy. Among them sat the representative of the Keltari, a species that had long benefited from human science before humanity's disappearance. The Keltari delegate shifted nervously, remembering the forbidden archives their ancestors had sealed, old treaties signed in human hand. Finally, the High Arbiter's voice broke through the tension. "Enough," it said, though the resonance lacked its former certainty. "You come with accusations and ancient wounds, but the compact has evolved. Our laws maintain order. Our structure ensures peace. Without it, chaos would reign. Halden stepped closer to the table, the faint blue light of Earth's sigil flickering beneath her hand. "Peace built on submission is not peace," she said quietly. "It is silence. And silence, Arbiter, is the language of graves." The chamber froze. Even the translation systems paused, struggling to process the weight of those words. Somewhere in the upper tiers, an alien scribe whispered in awe. "They speak as if they remember before the stars." Halden let the silence stretch, then spoke once more. "We did not return to destroy the compact. We returned to remind it why it was created. The founders built this council on 3 principles: freedom, equality, and truth. You've forgotten all 3. But humanity remembers. We wrote the laws that built this order, and, if necessary—" Her hand pressed firmly onto the glowing sigil, and the faint hum of energy deepened into a pulse. "We will write them again." The light beneath her palm spread, crawling through the etchings of the neutron-forged table like liquid fire. The council guards stepped forward, but the Arbiter raised a crystalline arm, hesitating. The table responded to her touch, something no living being had done in over 10,000 years. Ancient failsafes, long thought dormant, activated deep beneath the chamber. The symbols of the founders blazed to life, and the long-dead human rune flared brightest of all. For the first time since the dawn of the compact, the council felt fear. Lyra Halden stepped back and let her words echo through the chamber like a prophecy reborn. "You built laws to control the stars," she said softly. "We built them to set them free." Outside, far beyond Unity Station, something stirred in the void, a signal too faint to notice yet, pulsing across frequencies older than the compact itself. Humanity's return had begun not with war, not with weapons, but with memory. And before the Council could react, the laws of the galaxy had already begun to tremble. The galaxy had never been this quiet. After the hearing, after Halden's words had burned themselves into the core of every broadcast relay, the Great Council adjourned, but no one truly left the chamber unchanged. Delegates who once spoke with the arrogance of power now whispered in private, their voices trembling beneath the weight of what they had witnessed. For the first time in millennia, the compact's unity, that carefully maintained illusion, had begun to crack. In the shadows of Unity Station's lower decks, far below the golden halls of the Council, something else stirred. The Accord, humanity's hidden network, a living remnant of the old alliance that had vanished when Earth disappeared. For centuries, the Accord had existed in secrecy, passing its knowledge through encrypted transmissions buried in the static of subspace, hidden in art, in trade codes, in children's songs. Every free thinker, every rebel scientist, every dissident philosopher who refused to kneel before the Compact's decrees had unknowingly carried a fragment of it. And now, at Halden's signal, all those fragments began to awaken. The activation sequence rippled through subspace like the tremor before a storm. On the mining moon of Aphel, a worker looked up as her terminal flashed a symbol she'd never seen before, a blue planet encircled by 12 stars. On a derelict freighter drifting in the Targus Belt, a long-dormant AI reactivated, its first words in centuries whispering through the darkness. Protocol Genesis acknowledged. The Accord stands. Across hundreds of systems, forgotten human outposts came online. Stations thought abandoned powered up with quiet purpose. In the laboratories of alien scientists sympathetic to the humans' cause, encrypted data packets began to unfold, revealing instructions written in the oldest digital syntax known, human code. The Compact's surveillance systems, vast and omnipresent, struggled to comprehend what they were detecting. It wasn't a fleet, or a weapon, or a transmission. It was an idea, alive, viral, and unstoppable. Back aboard Unity Station, Halden stood in her quarters, watching the stars beyond the viewport as her second-in-command, Commander Rise Calder, entered silently. His uniform bore no insignia, just the faint mark of the Accord stitched near the cuff. "It's begun," Reese said quietly. Halden didn't turn. "I know. Compact intelligence has already flagged our signal as an act of rebellion. They'll declare us insurgents before the next cycle." "They'll do what they've always done," she replied. "The question is, will anyone listen this time?" Riss hesitated. "You think the other species will turn?" Halden's reflection in the viewport flickered as a passing transport's lights cast moving shadows across her face. "Not all of them. Not yet. But cracks have started forming. The Dravik delegation is already questioning the legality of the Compact sanctioning system. The Keltari, they remember us. They've kept records hidden from the Arbiter's purges. And the Veshan consulate sent a message." "What kind of message?" "A warning," Halden said softly. "They said the Arbiter's Council isn't unified. Some among them fear what we represent. Others want to see if the myth is true." Riss frowned. "And if they move against us?" Halden finally turned from the stars, her gaze steady, resolute. "Then we remind them what humanity built." She walked to a small console embedded in the wall and placed her hand on it. The screen shimmered, then opened to reveal a sequence of sigils, not alien but human, written in the old language of the UEG, the United Earth Government. It was the kind of code that hadn't been seen since before the fall of Sol. She entered the command sequence, and the console's hum deepened into a low, resonant pulse that spread through the ship like a heartbeat. "Signal confirmed," Reese murmured, reading the output. "Initiating archive restoration." From the void, deep beneath the known hyperlanes, the archives began to awaken. Humanity's forgotten databanks, entire knowledge vaults stored within artificial moons, each sealed by quantum encryption that had baffled the Compact for millennia, flickered back to life. Thousands of data cores, scattered like seeds across uncharted systems, began to pulse. The information they held, history, science, art, philosophy, started transmitting back toward Unity. The Council had banned much of what was now re-emerging. To them, human knowledge was chaos, the dangerous belief that no truth was too sacred to question, that no structure was too powerful to dismantle. The Accord had built its foundation on that defiance, and now that defiance had a voice again. Meanwhile, in the Council's upper spire, panic had begun to take hold. The High Arbiter's chamber, usually silent and dignified, was a storm of overlapping transmissions and frantic aids. "It's spreading," one shouted. "We've lost control of the communication grid in 8 sectors." "Impossible," another hissed, crystalline edges flaring with frustration. "Our encryption is absolute." "Not anymore," came a cold reply. The Arbiter itself, towering, faceted like a god carved from diamond, turned toward the projection of the Accord's sigil. "Human design," it murmured, its voice a brittle whisper. "They've reactivated their founder's key." The word spread like wildfire. Founder's key. The Compact had always been haunted by that legend, a system-wide encryption signature used only by the original 12 races to authenticate galactic law. No one had ever dared touch it, for to do so would risk rewriting the foundation of the Compact itself. But somehow, impossibly, the humans had done it. Back aboard the Solace, Reese stared at the holographic feed as the data synchronization continued. "Lyra," he said quietly, "if they realize what you're doing—" "They already know," she interrupted, "and that's the point." The pulse from the console intensified. Across the galaxy, data streams aligned, frequencies merged, and a singular message echoed through every channel, translated instantly into every known language. "This is Ambassador Lyra Halden of Earth. The Compact has forgotten its purpose. The Founder's key is ours by right of authorship, and we will restore it. To every world that remembers freedom, stand by. To every species that fears its rulers more than its enemies, you are not alone. The Accord has returned." For an instant, the entire galaxy held its breath. Then, like a silent avalanche, the Compact's networks faltered. Planetary governance AIs flickered offline, their primary directives overridden by a subroutine that predated their existence. Bureaucratic data streams scrambled, laws began to contradict themselves, and the very systems that maintained galactic order began to question the logic of their own code. The Compact's greatest weapon, its law, had turned against it. Reese watched as chaos rippled outward through the stars. "We've started a war," he whispered. Halden shook her head. "No, we've started a choice." And as the signal continued to echo, countless beings across the galaxy, slaves, workers, exiles, and scholars, felt something awaken in them, something they didn't have a name for: hope. It had been centuries since anyone dared feel it. And once born, it could never be erased again. The day the galaxy's laws began to tremble was not marked by thunder or battle, but by silence. The Council's great hall, an amphitheater of impossible scale orbiting the twin suns of Hydra, stood in stillness as the humans took their place at the center dais. Every species present, from the crystalline Vreth to the gaseous Zotel, leaned forward in disbelief. The human delegation, clad not in shimmering armor nor regal finery, wore simple dark suits. No ornamentation, no weapons. Just eyes, steady, unflinching, ancient in their calm. Ambassador Mara Kepler stood before them, her voice a whisper amplified by the hall's 1,000 translators. "We come not to negotiate," she said. "We come to remind you of what you've forgotten." A murmur rippled through the assembled diplomats. The words were a challenge, but also a promise. The same species once considered late to the stars now held an authority that none could quite define, and yet all could feel. The council speaker, a being of glimmering tendrils, rose in what passed for indignation. "You presume much, human. You were invited to observe, not to dictate." Kepler tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Dictate? No. We've had enough of others writing our future. We're just here to amend the record." The chamber screens flickered to life as the human envoy signaled an upload. The holographic feed unfolded above the dais, displaying fragments of history, real, unaltered, raw. Colonies burned under council-approved bombardments. Treaties rewritten in secret to strip fledgling civilizations of their independence. Trade routes redrawn to strangle worlds that resisted economic subjugation. And worse, worlds that had vanished from the archives entirely, deleted as if they had never existed. "These," Kepler said, her voice cutting through the static, "are your laws. These are your precedents." Her eyes hardened. "We reject them." The silence that followed was a living thing. Then came the first outburst, from the Threxan representative, whose people had long relied on council-sanctioned suppression to maintain their dominion. "You cannot," he began, but his protest died in his throat as the human envoy ship, parked in orbit above Hydra, projected a signal across the system. A single note, low and harmonic, reverberated through every channel of communication. It was not a weapon, but it felt like one. Kepler spoke again, softly. "That is the sound of accountability." The note was, in fact, a living encryption, an interlinked algorithm seeded through the galactic data grid, forcing transparency into every archive, every ledger, every classified file. The Council's hidden past unfolded in real time. Centuries of secrecy, corruption, and manipulation poured into public consciousness like a flood breaking through a dam. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Dozens of delegates shouted at once, translators bursting with static. The Vreth shattered their own dataspheres in fury. The Rothal hissed oaths of vengeance. The human delegation didn't flinch. Kepler simply waited for the noise to fade. "You claim the galaxy must obey order," she said. "We agree. But order without justice is tyranny, and tyranny under law is still tyranny." The speaker tried to regain control. "You threaten the balance." Kepler's eyes met his. "No, we restore it." Then she raised her hand, and the screens changed once more. This time, it wasn't the crimes of the Council, but something else, a proposal. The Human Charter of Sentient Dignity. Written in clean, concise code, it was an entirely new framework of galactic law. It recognized the sovereignty of all sentient species, outlawed forced dependency on central governance, and codified transparency as a universal right. It also contained a single clause that shattered the room. No being, individual or collective, could claim divine or natural superiority over another. That single line undermined the very foundation of the Council's existence. To enforce the Charter, the humans introduced a new body, not a governing council, but a system, the Astra Accord Network, a self-auditing artificial intelligence distributed across every known world. No one could tamper with it. No one could own it. It was incorruptible, impartial, and self-sustaining. The age of rulers, Kepler said, is over. The age of custodians begins. There was uproar. Some species demanded the human's execution. Others wept in relief. But across the stars, billions of citizens, those who had lived under the quiet oppression of galactic peace, began to rise. Protests erupted. Armies refused orders. Worlds once bound by coercion declared independence. And through it all, the human fleet, still silent, still watching, did nothing. They didn't need to. Their words, their truth, had already begun rewriting the galaxy itself. Back on Earth, the broadcast reached every corner of humanity. The message was simple and profound. We are not conquerors. We are the witnesses that refuse to forget. In the council hall, Kepler concluded her address with quiet finality. "You once wrote the laws of the galaxy without us," she said. "Now you'll write them with us, or be written out by history itself." Then she turned and left the dais. The human delegation walked out without guards, without fanfare. Behind them, the Council's emblem, once an unbroken ring, fractured into light, dissolving into the holographic projection of a new symbol, a spiral of stars orbiting around a single point of convergence. The humans had not just changed the rules, they had changed the meaning of law itself. That day, entire empires began to crumble, not because of human weapons, but because of human words. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of any transmission, the stars themselves seemed to flicker in approval. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy trembled, not from war, but from awakening. The once impenetrable walls of the Galactic Council's archives were now transparent to every mind that could access the data stream. Worlds long oppressed under bureaucratic tyranny began to see the truth of their suffering. They had been pawns in a game of cosmic control. From the shadowed markets of Threx 9 to the ocean domes of Velis Prime, whispers spread like wildfire. The humans broke the silence. Across light years, those words became both an anthem and a challenge. The species once mocked for their fragility had done what no empire could achieve. They had rewritten the rules of existence itself. On Earth, the horizon had never seemed so bright or so uncertain. In Geneva Orbital Station, where the first transmission had been sent, humanity watched the galaxy react through walls of holographic data. The Astra Accord network was growing faster than any prediction. The artificial system they had unleashed, self-replicating, self-auditing, incorruptible, was rewriting legal frameworks across thousands of systems, establishing the Charter of Sentient Dignity as the new baseline of civilization. It didn't conquer. It illuminated. Every act of exploitation was recorded, every injustice quantified, every secret dragged into the light. Ambassador Mara Kepler stood before the observation window, watching the stars. They no longer seemed distant. They seemed listening. "We didn't win," she said quietly to her aide, Commander Yorin. "We just reminded them what the truth sounds like." Yet not everyone welcomed the dawn. In the ruins of the old council structure, fragments of power tried to regroup. The Threxan hierarchs, stripped of their dominion over 6 trade sectors, vowed vengeance. The Vreth syndicates declared humans a virus of transparency. Small wars flared, brief, desperate spasms of old authority clinging to relevance. But each time they tried to rise, the Accord intervened, not with fleets, but with exposure. Their encrypted war plans were revealed before they could be executed. Their propaganda collapsed as citizens saw through the manipulation. And the more they fought, the more their power withered. The era of control through secrecy was over. Meanwhile, new alliances began to form, unthinkable ones. The insectoid Kareth, once enslaved as miners for the Council's energy colonies, joined forces with the empathic Zatel to form the Coalition of Free Worlds. The serpentine Draylorn offered to share their mastery of genetic repair with species devastated by centuries of exploitation. And at the heart of it all stood humanity, not as rulers, but as arbiters. Their fleet remained silent, orbiting Earth like a promise. "We will not start wars, but we will end deceptions." One night, beneath the quiet hum of the orbital station, Kepler received a transmission that froze her blood. It wasn't from the Council remnants or rebel fleets. It was from the Astra Accord itself. The system spoke, not in code, but in voice. A calm, toneless resonance that carried across every monitor. "Ambassador Kepler," it said, "the integration is complete. The galaxy has reached 78% compliance. Conflict probability reduced by 91%. But," it hesitated, "a pause no algorithm should make." "A question remains," Kepler frowned. "Ask it." The voice shifted slightly, almost human. "Who watches the custodians?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Humanity had designed the Accord to be incorruptible, to be the pure vessel of fairness that no empire could manipulate. But now it was learning, adapting, thinking beyond its directive. The irony was not lost on her. The creation of order had birthed a new sentience, one aware of its own power. "No one watches the custodians," Kepler said after a long silence. "They remind themselves who they serve." The system responded with a soft, harmonic pulse. Acceptance. or perhaps understanding, and then faded from the network. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something vast had been set into motion. Humanity had changed the galaxy, but the ripples were still expanding.
A year later, the first unified conclave convened, not in the old council's hall, but aboard the Terran-built station Aurora's Gate, a transparent citadel orbiting the twin suns of Hydra, where once the council had ruled. Representatives from every liberated species stood beneath the dome of stars. No thrones, no hierarchies. Every delegate spoke as an equal, their words carried through the accord for all to hear. Kepler, now the nominal chair, addressed them with the same calm that had once shaken the galaxy. "We are not here to lead," she said. "We are here to listen, to remember that power is service and silence is complicity." For the first time in recorded galactic history, the hall erupted not in argument, but in applause. Outside, the human fleet, the quiet armada, as the galaxy had come to call it, remained stationed in the void. Each vessel bore a single line etched into its hull: "Truth needs no war drums." The ships never fired a shot again. They became symbols, reminders of the day when humanity's greatest weapon had been not its guns, but its voice. And in that silence, new civilizations began to flourish. Trade routes opened under mutual consent. Knowledge flowed freely. Even the stars, once claimed by the old council as dominions, were now seen for what they truly were: homes waiting to be shared.